things are happening in our world right now that are making things difficult for people. But on the flip side of that coin, people can support one another. So if you've got a relative that, could be feeling down, is having a tough time, maybe pick up the phone, give them a call, send them a message, say, do you want to have like a chat over Teams? Like we can do it once a week, or, there's lots of things that can be done, or even basic things like, can I get you any shopping and leave it on your doorstep? Because the other thing that this is bringing out a lot of is some people are feeling quite anxious about actually leaving their homes when they are allowed to. So just like little things to help out and show people that actually they're not alone. That message of you're not alone is very powerful.
Hello and welcome to Different Conversations, where every week we have a different academic from liberal arts and sciences talking to us about their research, what they're doing at the moment, and why it's interesting, cool, and exciting. And this week we've got something that is, well, by definition, different, I guess. Interesting, different, a little dark, admittedly, and a little bit of an interesting conversation to have, but one that I think is quite important. I'm looking forward to welcoming a good friend, my colleague, Dr. Jay-Marie Mackenzie, Senior Lecturer in Psychology. Jay, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
We're surviving this second lockdown 2.0 in the UK at the moment.
Yeah.
And yourself, you're surviving at the moment?
Yeah, nothing's changed for me. I feel like I'm still sitting at home working. It shows me how little I leave my house.
We are just at the moment, aren't we? Just sitting at home working. And then it's a little bit rinse and repeat and do the same thing again at the moment. I miss work. I never thought I'd say that, but I miss the lab. I miss the research.
Yeah.
I miss the moment. Anyway, so I'm really pleased to have you on today because I think your work's really interesting and cool. And one of those things we want to tell people about. But so just jump right through the front door on this. Your research is on suicide. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Before we even start this conversation, I think I need to ask you, because I'm quite ignorant of this topic, how do we even talk about suicide? Because normally people avoid this topic, don't they?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stigma. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of stigma around suicide. So when we're talking about, this today, and if we were talking about this in general, there's certain things that, we need to be mindful of. So like the terminology that we use, for example, and a lot of the time you will hear people say, commit suicide. Okay, this is a term that's quite an old term, because actually suicide used to be in the UK a crime, and it isn't a crime anymore. It still is in some countries, believe it or not, but people will still say commit suicide, and that can be quite offensive actually, and quite upsetting to someone. So we will try and steer clear of that term, and we will actually say something like carry out suicide, die by suicide, attempt suicide. So we steer clear of that. So we've got to be important with our language, and we've got to think about being non-judgmental. And that's the key when we're talking about this.
It makes sense, I think, from a language point of view. And to be clear, my limited understanding on this topic is basically from watching programs that always have that tagline afterwards. If this has triggered anything with you, if you want to talk about anyone, maybe contact someone else or talk to someone about this. But we should be talking about suicide. Is that correct? Like, it's not a topic we should try and cover up or not talk about. It's important to have these conversations in public.
Yeah, it definitely is important to have these conversations in public. So probably we should start off by saying, actually, if anybody is listening to this and is sort of triggered or is feeling upset in any way in relation to any of the topics we do discuss, you can go and get support. There's lots of places out there that will provide support. So the Samaritans is a really good place. They've got helplines, because with somebody there 24 hours a day. I was a Samaritan for about 11 years.
Wow.
So, we get all types of people call. You don't have to be suicidal. You can be feeling down, having other sort of life events going on, maybe a lot to cope with. So they're always there. There's lots of different other agencies and charities too. And yeah, I think the important thing is that sometimes we shy away from these conversations because they are difficult to have, or they're perceived to be difficult to have. And actually, having that dialogue and having open discussions around this can make people more likely to come forward. So we've seen quite a big shift in, I suppose, the last recent year or so with this Be Kind movement, and the idea that actually we just need a bit of compassion and, you know, going back to those human basics of kindness and compassion and being there for another person. And it doesn't really take very much, actually. So just listening to somebody can be really empowering and really helpful to an individual who might be in distress or having like a low mood or feeling suicidal. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's actually really interesting. And like you say, it's one of those topics that when originally this pitch was being developed and I wanted to talk to you about this, I wasn't sure how to even approach it. Because, like you say, this is a conversation that I would think would be quite difficult. People aren't comfortable talking about things like death, like suicide. And there's kind of almost an old-fashioned politeness to kind of just sweep that over there type thing, not address it in the open. But as you say, addressing it in the open can actually be quite helpful. And it's important we do this, if I've got that correct.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's kind of, suicide is not, it's not an easy thing, okay? So it's very complex, and there'll be lots of reasons why somebody might get to the point why they feel suicidal. So I won't talk about that today. But I think from the other side of the coin, when you're somebody who has got perhaps a loved one or a friend or a family member who is disclosing suicidal thoughts to you, suicidal feelings, the best thing to do actually is to not judge them. So refrain from judgment. Be open, have open discussions, allow them to talk. And actually, some people sort of make the mistake, and it sounds horrible to say it's a mistake because it's really coming from a kind place a lot of the time. But a lot of the time, people will kind of make this mistake of saying, right, do this, do that, do this, and give out advice. Now, there is a place for advice, of course. And if you've got a person who's very much in distress and really needs, you know, some immediate assistance, that's very different. But actually, if you're telling somebody from your own perspective what they should be doing, how they should be doing it, that doesn't always translate because people are very different to one another. So what can be more helpful to that person is just listen to them, explore their feelings. Oh, you told me this. How long have you been feeling like that? Check what you understand is correct. So, oh, you said this, and I think this is what you mean. Is that right? You know, it's little basic things like that. It's like engaging in kind of like a dialogue that we're engaging in now. And a lot of the time what you'll find, you know, from my own research, I've heard a lot of the time from people that just having somebody else as a sounding board can make you look differently at things, and it can change your perspective. So you might have sort of suicidal feelings and you're feeling like that's the only kind of option right now, when actually if you talk things through, other things come to your mind. And you can see there's different options out there. And actually, I've just got this person sitting here listening to me, supporting me, and that's really helpful. That's kind of a different scenario to if we're thinking about maybe talking to a stranger. So some of my own research, again, I've done some research on suicide in public locations, and I've worked with Middlesex University on this one, really amazing researcher in this area, Dr Lisa Monzono. And some of our research led to the campaign that the Samaritans have run, Small Talk Saves Lives. And you may have heard of it before, but the idea behind that is actually sometimes if somebody is in distress, just interrupting that suicidal thought process can help. So it doesn't have to be about something big. It can literally be, oh, you know, we can have a little chat about the weather, for example, or just to interrupt that suicidal thought process and trying to engage in conversation. I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
No, it does. I think it's really cool. And I really I've heard of the campaign before, Small Talk Saves Lives. And I think it's really awesome, empowering, really interesting that kind of seemingly almost meaningless small intervention from your point of view can have such a big impact on a stranger, on someone you come across in a public space. And it's that kind of public space research into suicide that you've done before. When I've looked into your past and read some of your writings and that kind of thing, you did a lot of work with National Rail, I think it was, wasn't it, on railways? That must have been quite difficult, but interesting work. So tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so that's exactly where the campaign came from, actually. So that was about people that might be having suicidal thoughts and feelings at railway locations. And our findings did suggest that actually having this kind of, well, it's not really an intervention, but it is kind of an intervention. So just having somebody there that talks to them. So some of the feedback from our participants was that bowels can be quite isolating places. And actually, if they're feeling low in these situations, then having somebody there who goes and talks to them can actually help to kind of not stop those feelings, but interrupt them and give them a time to pause and think a little bit differently. So, yeah, that was the main kind of outcomes of that research.
So does that like change behaviors? Like you can almost imagine interventions coming out of that. When you think about not conductors, what are they called in the UK, but those people that stand on the platforms of the tube with the signs, like all of a sudden you can think about how they can have massive influence on people's lives and people in train stations or whatever they're called. Just do you work with them? Do you teach them what to look out for? Is this like an avenue for your work, I guess, a practical application of this?
Yeah, so as an outcome of our work, we've fed back our findings. So we've done I should go back a step, because we've carried on with our research and we've done some work around bystander interventions at these locations too, and the role that like the public can play and also staff can play. So we've fed back those findings to TfL and Network Rail, and some of the stuff that's come out of it as well is certain behaviours. So, for example, I did some analysis of CCTV footage of suicides. yeah. But obviously I can't see everything, but it's, you can see the behaviours maybe leading up to people's attempts. And also, I think if we are talking about this subject, but people sort of tend to see the railway as maybe lethal place, when actually we know lots of people survive as well, and there's a lot of opportunity for people to have an intervention. So that's one of the big findings, is that actually the public and members of staff can play a huge role in saving people's lives. So even if that's just by having a chat with somebody, or kind of picking up that somebody seems to be distant or upset perhaps, and sometimes there might be somebody that's feeling quite upset or low, and they're maybe coming home from work and they're sitting on a bench at a railway station and they don't feel suicidal, but they are down. And really, I think the point is we need to kind of take it back to human compassion and kindness. Like if we were to just go up to someone and say, oh, I can see, are you okay? You look a bit down, are you okay? They might not be feeling suicidal, but they could still be upset, and if they're visibly distressed, it's human nature to go up to them and chat. So I think the point is, more broadly, even if we don't think about these specific locations, just being there for one another is really important. And we all have a role to play within, our society. And we all, to some degree, have a responsibility to other humans just to listen and be there. And it is easy sometimes to make assumptions and make judgments, but there is also a time for us to put those judgments and assumptions aside and just think, well, let's talk. Let's see how you're feeling.
I really like that quite simple point, and I'm just going to make sure I say it again. So I've got it right in my head, but I'm going home from work or something on a train, on a platform. I see someone who's clearly having a bad day. I walk up to them and say, hi, how are you feeling today? How's it going? Are you okay? I'm clearly not going to walk up to them and say, are you feeling suicidal? Let me intervene. Obviously not. But hi, how are you feeling today? Are you having an okay day? And best case scenario, we've broken this chain of negative thought like you've talked about. And worst case scenario, I just come off as an odd stranger talking to someone who's having a bad day.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world for anyone. Nice to meet you. Sorry, bye. But I can see how that's, like you say, something we should just do anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant way.
Sorry.
No, go on. I was going to say it's just a brilliant way to look at it, actually, and it's actually something that I would say quite a lot. You've got to look at what's the outcome of these scenarios. You could just potentially really help someone for whatever reason. It doesn't matter if that person's upset or distressed, you can help them. Or what's the cost to you? And it's that answer that you gave there, you could be a bit embarrassed because you've spoke to somebody. So, weighing up the cost there, I really like that. And it's really important to think about it that way.
And I think embarrassing myself is something I actually do for a living a lot as an academic, as a lecturer, as a scientist, unfortunately, as a person on camera every now and then. But I think we're a bit English about it, aren't we? Sometimes we're a bit, well, we'll just ignore that. We're pretty okay.
Yeah, I think there is an element. Some of our recent research that came out quite a lot, actually. This sort of cultural barrier, people describing it as kind of like an English culture, particularly like in inner cities, when people just don't, they pretend nothing's going on. But I think there is a shift. I do think there is a shift, and I think that's a good thing. And this isn't just about suicide. This is about all, any form of sort of distress or upset, or any sort of mental health problems, And I think there's now a shift occurring, thankfully, within our society, where people are becoming more understanding that lots of people will experience difficult times in their lives. And just being there for one another can really help. Unfortunately, obviously, on the flip side of that coin, you do have a minority of people who still stigmatize mental health and suicide and things like that, but that isn't helpful, and it creates a worse situation. So
one of the things I wanted to talk to you about specifically, I can't have a conversation at the moment without saying COVID-19 is just not possible. It hasn't been since, I think, February, March in the United Kingdom. That's my fire alarm. True story.
Okay.
I don't know if you can hear it at your end. So we're just going to sit there and wait for that to stop, because they're probably just testing it.
Okay.
Yeah, they stopped. We may or may not leave that in.
I think we should, for comedic value.
Oh my God.
Makes it real life.
Yeah. So one of the things I specifically wanted to talk to you about, heaven forbid we have a conversation at the moment without talking about COVID-19, 2020, the year that has been so far, was in the United Kingdom, we're in our second major lockdown to do with COVID-19, the pandemic, and restrictions on people's movements, on interactions with other people, on socialization. And that must be quite a difficult time for a number of people. So I wondered about whether or not some of your research had any reflections on how people are dealing with the lockdown, or maybe can deal with the lockdown better. Any commentary basically on this?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point that you raise. And I suppose within my area and my field, it's not controversial, but there's been a lot of sort of negative stuff in the media around suicides are going to go up, there's going to be this big mental health crisis, and there might be, okay? We don't know. Some of the data that's coming out is just a recent study published by Manchester University, and they are suggesting that the data doesn't show that at the moment. However, I think regardless of really what's going to happen, what we just need to be mindful of is actually, in a very odd way, you're going to think I'm crazy by saying this, but in an odd way, the positives of this. Because what we're seeing now is a massive shift in the way communities are working together. And I sort of thought about this the other day. My friend, she's recently moved into a new house, and her neighbour comes over. She doesn't come over, she doesn't break the social distancing rules, but she will knock on a door and she'll leave something that she's cooked on the doorstep, and such kindness, and it's really nice. I think we did see a shift away from kind of this community sort of style. And because of lockdown, because of COVID-19, you're seeing neighbours engage with one another in ways that they hadn't done previously. You're seeing people connect in completely different ways. I'm talking to you now. Do you think we would have done this if we were at university? Probably not. And I think this is the thing. There's something to be celebrated as well. So I think, yes, this is going to be really difficult, right? We can't deny that. Things are happening in our world right now that are making things difficult for people. People are losing their jobs, and that's really, really difficult. And that's really difficult if you're already feeling low and you've got a lot going on, or something has happened in your life that's really difficult to manage. But on the flip side of that coin, people can support one another. So if you've got a relative or a family member, they're the same thing, a family friend, that could be feeling down, is having a tough time, maybe pick up the phone, give them a call, send them a message, say, do you want to have a chat over Teams, like we can do it once a week, or there's lots of things that can be done, or even basic things like, can I get you any shopping and leave it on your doorstep? Because the other thing that this is bringing out a lot of is some people are feeling quite anxious about actually leaving their homes when they are allowed to. So just like little things to help out and show people that actually they're not alone. And I think being like that message of you're not alone is very powerful. So there's this kind of thing where we can celebrate that flip side to this unusual time we find ourselves in, and kind of be there for other people as best we can, really.
I like that message. I do. I like the message of taking the positives out of this experience, because 2020 has been, let's face it, a bit of a disaster of a year, not just for a number of reasons. And like you said, there's all these interesting positives. And you're right. Like I live in an apartment in central London that has, 24 other people in it. And I know one couple in this building before this era. And now I know all my neighbors. And like in March, someone left a sign on the door saying, we're your local people at 302. Give us a buzz if you want, if you need some help with shopping, all that kind of thing. And that has been really positive to see people helping out. Long might that last, right? Some sort of difficulties to overcome to remind ourselves of these things. I also like your point about kindness, because we've seen almost like divergent social and political behaviors, I think, over the last 4 or 5 years, maybe. And maybe it's just kind of, this is the era I'm living through, so I know it now, and it's always been this way. But we have seen definitely this us versus them approach versus a more of a be kind approach. And I think I use that phrase as a New Zealander because the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is very famous for her be kind approach to life. So that's a nice message. I like that message. I do.
Good, I'm glad. I think that is the main thing to kind of sort of bear in mind with all of this, that sometimes when we are looking to answer big questions on big topics that are very important, because this one, this is about saving people's lives ultimately. But when we're looking to solve those big problems, actually, it might just be about returning to the basics of humanity and the things that actually we have inside ourselves. A lot of us, if most people are able to look inside themselves and find skills of sympathy, empathy, compassion, kindness, being non-judgmental. And they are skills that actually a lot of us don't need teaching. They are there and they are ingrained, and they come from an early age. I'm thinking about my daughter here. She's started a new nursery recently, and there's a little girl in the nursery that's started at the same time with her. And my child is very talkative. She takes after her mum. And the other little girl that she started with got quite upset. And my daughter went up to her and gave her a cuddle and said, "Thank you for better." And I think, it's there, isn't it? Like, she's a 2-year-old and it's there. And I think, so we just need to rely on our basic instincts and what our instincts are telling us. When we respond to another person in distress, that's natural, that's normal. Just returning to those basic human skills really is really important.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's a surprisingly simple yet heavy message that I think is really important. And maybe we forget that sometimes, but I like it. I like it a lot. One project I know you're working on at the moment, speaking about caring for people. And I know we've talked a lot about self-harm and suicide so far, but you're also doing some work on people who support people who have or do self-harm. And so I wanted to make sure we mention that and give that a little bit of fair publicity. So tell me about this, because I think this is quite important.
Yeah, so this is a project, actually, interestingly, that one of my PhD students, Laura Coleshaw, was involved with. And her work was with, and is still with, university students who self-harm. And what she found in her research was that there is a number of people who are actually also providing support to these students. So that could be like family and friends and even professionals like counsellors or lecturers, actually. And so we decided that this was a really important issue. We were hearing this and we were thinking, well, there's not much been done in this area. So we did some further research, and we got some funding, luckily, to be able to develop a website. And this website is for people who provide support to people who self-harm. But it's bigger than that. That's the original focus of it. But actually, it's about just people taking on that kind of supporting, caring role. And if you've got anybody in your life that's going through a crisis, whatever that crisis might be, that can be very difficult for so many reasons. It evokes all sorts of feelings. You can feel quite helpless, powerless. You know, what do you do? Are you doing the right thing? And what we identified is actually people need support too. These people need support too. So this website's got lots of resources on it, and it's really about self-care. Okay, so taking this time to look after yourself as well. So if you're there for another person and you're supporting another person, you also need to take that time to look after yourself too. And our website, which is am I allowed to drop the yeah, I am, good. Okay, it's called cherishsupport.co.uk. And that's got lots of resources on there for people who might be experiencing these types of things. So they can actually go on and have a look at kind of tips and hints. We've got blogs around self-compassion, and I've actually got one on talking about sensitive issues and active listening and validating people's feelings. So yeah, you can have a read of those if you're interested. But I think it's interesting because I listened to Professor Damien Ridge's podcast that he did with you. Was this a few weeks ago? I can't remember, but
it was actually the last season, so it was during the March-April lockdown, I think.
Okay. So I was listening to that the other day. Yeah, and he was talking. He said that you should have 3 things you should be thankful for every day. And I wondered if I could add to that.
Brilliant, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and if anybody's listening to this now or watching this right now, I would really recommend that you listen to that podcast. Obviously, listen to all the podcasts, but I really like that one. Yeah. But I think also there's this kind of, I think that is such a positive message that we can identify things in our life that we can be grateful for. And that's kind of self-care in itself, because we're sitting back and we're thinking and we're taking that time to be mindful about all the things in our lives that actually are good. So I think also what we could kind of add to that is 2 things. During these difficult times, we might take time out each day to check in on a person or do something for another person. So actually it's almost like the gift of giving, where there's a bit of kindness there, and we can, that will lead on to that person maybe doing the same thing. So any little thing you can do in your daily life just to be there for another person or do something kind. And then on the other side is do something kind for yourself that day. So whether that is maybe, I don't know if you like to read, sit there with a book or go out for a dog walk, or something that you know is like kind of giving a bit of self-care to you. So we've got the things that Damien said. Think about 3 positive things in your life, things to be grateful for. Perhaps if you've got the capacity to do something small for another person, whether that's just give them a quick phone call or send them a message, and then also doing something for yourself. And I think that kind of is, can help in these sorts of times.
Well, I feel like you've opened yourself up to this. So I'm going to ask you 2 specific questions as we round off today. Number one, Dr. Jay Mackenzie, what are you going to do for yourself today in a positive way? What am I going to do
for myself today?
Exactly.
Oh, that's a difficult one. Other than drink 59 cups of coffee, which is always self-love, isn't it?
It's a good day.
Yeah, yeah, that is a good day. I'm going to buy myself one of those they usually use for beer, and they put the beer in with the no, but I'm going to put coffee in mine. Yeah. Today I will probably read a book. So I'll probably make some time to read a book, a trashy book, not an academic book, a nice trashy book. I like a trashy book. I'll have to put my head in front of all the reading in the background. So I'll probably do that today. And then tomorrow I do a yoga class online, so I'll do that. So it's just something small, and then I've got another yoga class on Friday. So it's just little things each day, and then like a dog walk. I always make time for a dog walk.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And number 2, again, you open yourself up for this one. What are your 3 things that you're thankful for today?
Oh, I'm thankful for many things.
Very good.
I'm always very thankful. I'm thankful to be alive. I'm thankful to be in this world. I think, I just think this is such a lovely time. In a lot of people might think that sounds like a strange thing, but it's such a lovely time to be alive and have connection with people. I'm thankful for having my job, because at the moment we see, unfortunately, a lot of difficult things going on and people losing their jobs. I'm thankful to have my family. I'm thankful to have my dog. I'm thankful to have my house. I'm thankful for coffee.
Whoa, I only said 2, man.
Yeah, I know. I'll keep going, 30. Yeah,
I think you could.
I could.
I love the positive optimism. I really do. I think Damien, in his interview, called it realistic optimism, which I quite liked as a phrase back then. But the positivity also helps, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, just to make sure we got that in there, I think we did mention it, but I do want to make sure it's in there, cherishsupport.co.uk. So people who care for people who self-harm or maybe are in distress. And I think it's a really positive message and a really positive group of people to be working with. So thanks for that.
It's okay.
Brilliant. I think, unfortunately, that's probably all we have time for today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, feel free to subscribe, whether or not you're listening to the audio version on Spotify, on iTunes, whatever channel you're on, or the video version on YouTube at the moment. We've had Dr. Jay-Marie Mackenzie, Senior Lecturer in Psychology today. My name's Brad Elliott, and this has been Different Conversations.